All right, looks like we're at time, so let's go ahead and get started with today's webcast. I want to welcome you all to the Around the Valuation World monthly webcast. This is the November 18th edition. There's our disclaimer. I just want to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started with the program today. First of all, to obtain CPE credit for the webcast today, you must answer all the poll questions that pop up on your screen. CPE is issued to individuals who have AVW subscription for CPE. If you are interested in obtaining CPE for this webcast, there's a link in the material that you can click on to subscribe, or you can contact us, and our member client service team can help you with that. With Around the Valuation, we try to cover all the upcoming topics in the industry. Obviously, once a month with 2 hours, we can't cover all the information. So there are links to other resources that you can visit to keep up on the industry events and upcoming changes. And with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Mel and Alina, who will get us started today.
Oh, thank you, Chinda. Welcome to the November session of Around the Valuation World. These are the correspondents that help us put this program together for you. And just like every session, this session is going to be full of good information. We will start out with one of my favorites, Michael Gregory, talking about industry updates and headlines and the things that are going on to allow you to go deeper on some of the things that might be impacting your practice. And then we'll move to commercial damages and lost profits with Roberto Castro and Jason Pierce. And then we'll bring our very own Brien Jones on to talk about NACVA news. And then we'll move into one of the most popular sessions, which is with the judges, with Janae Castell, with the honorable judges getting a view from the bench. And then we'll bring it home with Charles Persing talking about Connelly versus US and the impact on valuations and value. And finally, with growing your practice with Ed Mofrad and David Fein. And so our first session this morning is with Michael Gregory. Michael is one of the most popular contributors to AVW, and I think he's been on almost every single one. And he comes in with a tremendous amount of credentials, experience in mediation, valuation, and bringing this to us. Michael, welcome to another AVW, and I'm going to let you take it away from there.
Thank you very much, Mel. Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to be with you today. I have a little longer session than today. I'm usually on for about 10 minutes, and I'll be on about twice that duration today, but I'm going to share some additional information with you. That's who I am. Those are my credentials, and I'm going to share a number of things. So 6 articles I'm going to go over with you. Jointly retained valuation engagements, a roadmap for trust and cooperation. Gregory reveals what's going on with the IRS and tax valuations. Valuation report excerpts using Pepperdine to estimate a discount rate. Ideas from the trenches on growing your BV practice. Private company EBITDA multiples continue an upward trend. And NACVA to roll out AI Data University. So starting off in terms of the objectives, consider being retained as a jointly retained expert. Think about that. You can be the expert for both sides and what that might mean and how you can market yourself to do that and what that might mean for you and your practice. Identify what's going on at the IRS. Evaluate if Pepperdine corroborating discount rate. Consider these strategies to grow your practice. Identify private company EBITDA multiple trends and recognize NACVA to roll out AI Data University. They're ahead of the curve on this topic. So for the first item, jointly retained valuation engagements. This is an article by Jesse Gillette, and I'm a mediator, for those of you who don't know that. I've been a mediator since 2004 with the Minnesota Supreme Court. And I mediate typically 2 to 4 times a month all over the country, mostly IRS, valuations and taxpayers. I should say it started off mostly IRS and taxpayers. Today it's more business to business, business to government like IRS, and then within businesses, with succession planning and other places where there may be disputes. But this is an article that says not mediation, where as a mediator, the parties make the decisions. In this case, you're making the decision in terms of the valuation. You serve both clients with one valuation. And the article goes into why this is an advantage for both parties. It's less expensive. Both parties must agree. You're going to be transparent with what you're doing, and they're going to be transparent with you. So if you need something or you want something, they're to provide that to you. This is to be a collaborative process, but you're there instead of having an appraiser on each side. And if they don't agree, there could be a third party. You come on board. This is all expensive. This says one appraiser for both parties relative to the business. So to set it up for success, the first thing you have to do is build trust. You have to build trust with both parties. And when I talk about trust with both parties, that means with the decision maker and their attorney. Then you have to have the relevant experience. This isn't something you do as a new business valuer. This is something you do as an experienced business valuer that knows how to build that trust, how to do your work, and how to work with both parties. And then you're going to spell out exactly what you're going to do. The article says you need to have your structure, who you're going to interview, what the time frames are, how this is all going to work. You're going to draft a report. Then you're going to present this back to your clients, and then you're going to modify your report based on any things that come back to you. So it's kind of a unique process to do this, and I thought it's something that's very positive for the client. It can be very positive for you, and it's something you might want to present yourself in as an expert back if you're involved with folks that would be interested in retaining you as a jointly retained expert. Now, this is a 1-hour presentation that I gave to the New York State Society of CPAs, but it was written up with BV Wire on Gregory reveals what's going on with the IRS and tax valuations. So what I decided to do is I'm putting some things in here, but I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit with you too. In terms of top issues, this is saying what are the things that the IRS folks spend more time on and looking at a valuation report. They get your report, they look at it and they say from the table of contents, does it look like it's a qualified appraisal? And are you a qualified appraiser? And assuming that's true, they'll go and take a look at the assumptions and limiting conditions. And they're looking for things that you put in to guard yourself. So for example, if there was a real property valuation that should have been done and there wasn't, and you said, the client directed me to make use of assessed values, or the client directed me to use book numbers, or whatever you did, that's something the IRS would be looking for because you're protecting your own liability, but there may be a problem with the overall valuation of everything that's involved with the estate or the gift. The top issues, first one is discount for lack of marketability, and there's a job aid on that and reasonable comp and on subchapter S corporations. If you went to my website, mikegreg.com, you can see all those. I've got them listed under my books. You also would comment that I have a critique of those. That's a free ebook that I have associated with my books. But you can also download them directly from the IRS if you put in on Google, valuation of assets, IRS. You can download all three of them. And actually the reasonable comp one is made up of the reasonable comp in terms of the report and also a really good appendix. But discount for lack of marketability, I said the assumptions and limiting conditions. Subchapter S, tax affecting. The IRS does not have a policy that says you cannot tax affect. That's a double negative. But if you tax affect, that isn't necessarily wrong, but the IRS does not tax affect, but they'll take a look at it and say, maybe the DLOM might be different, maybe the discount rate might be different. It might be your value is just fine. As I said, reasonable comp, you're checking out cash flows and looking at the discount rate and say, do those look reasonable? What assumptions did you make? If you don't have any adjustments, that looks odd. If you have a whole lot of adjustments, that looks odd. So what makes sense for someone who's an experienced valuer to see what kind of changes there might be for this kind of entity, if it's a manufacturing entity or it's heavy in assets, or if it's a service entity, whatever. And then math errors, about a third of the valuations tend to have some math error in it. They may not be material, but sometimes they are. So I'm always cautioning somebody should review that. And in previous episodes of this program, folks indicated that most places do not do a full quality control check. And that's one of the reasons that those things show up. And then there's a chart inside this article. It was part of my presentation on DLOMs. I went to IRS Business Valuers and I said, what methods do you see and where do you see them being applied? And that chart I presented when I made this presentation, it's also in this particular BV Wired. You can download this again. And in there, the most common methods inside here are restricted stock studies, cost of flotation, Mandelbaum factors, the guideline public company method, GPCM for 3 different ones for Leaps, Longstaff, and Finnerty. Then the QMDM model with Mercer, the NICE model with Bill Fowler, the NERA model, the Johnson Park empirical method, the Stout, formerly known as FMV opinions, where the service says use the first variable and then use your judgment with the various factors. In the book by Hitchner on discount for lack of marketability and toolkit, he has 38 factors. In the IRS job aid, they have 32 factors listed there. With Plurus, I said make use of the first variable of the 2 variables and then apply the similar technique. I'd also comment that on Plurus, be careful because they offer it with and without warrants. Without warrants is a black box. So we don't know what's in it. You don't know what's in it. It's not, maybe not the best to use that. And then the VFC DLOM calculator, and I comment, take a look at Ashok Abbott and his analysis. And he's just come out with a new beta release that you can take a look at that from him too. And then all those methods in the chart that's with this, again, you can download this from BVWire. It indicates which of these methods might be used for different types of entities, like holding companies, operating entities, small entities, large entities, going public, and then pass-throughs like LLCs, FLPs, and 1120Ss. And I did that because I reached out about a year and a half or 2 years ago to business valuers at the IRS, and I said, can you tell me which methods and where do you see them being used and where do you think that's okay? So that's one of the items that's in there that you might want to look at that chart. In terms of hiring implications, the IRS is trying to hire. They've been trying to hire since 2022. And the IRS received a fair amount of money and increased their budget by about 50%. There was some reduction on that by Congress. They're planning on this for a 10-year period. I worked at the IRS for 28 years, and in 2 other times, I should say on 3 other times, I watched Congress funded the IRS for 5-year periods. But then a new administration came in and they cut everything. I think that's likely to happen again. So the IRS got this for part of 2022, for 2023, for 2024. Now we're going to move into October 1. We moved into 2025 here. And I suspect 2025 is operating by a continuing resolution right now. I think there are going to be some significant cuts, likely by the Trump administration. And once again, 2 years out from now, they're going to say, IRS, why didn't you get all these things done you said you were going to do? You know, you guys just don't know what you're doing. And I'm guessing it's going to be the cuts are going to hit, and then Congress will blame the IRS for not doing what they said they were going to do in terms of this 10-year plan. That's just my guess. About 75% of the engineers will have under 3 years experience at the IRS. They might have a lot of experience outside of IRS. And they're not meeting their hiring goals. They hope to hire around 400 by July of this year. And they had a total number of employees around 360, of which 40 were management or people who provided assistance. So they only had about 320. So they're quite a bit behind where they wanted to be. They've expanded up to 9 territory managers. So they're looking to more than double the size of the IRS, and we'll see what happens. But when you're working with IRS people, be patient, be cooperative, be there to help. They may ask dumb questions. Sometimes that's a technique to ask a dumb question so that you think they're not as smart as you think they are, because you're more likely to say something you wouldn't otherwise say. But the IRS will be seen on more audits. They're looking for training cases with all these new people coming in. So they'll be working smaller cases. They also work international cases and domestic. So that's kind of an overall view of like where the IRS is with the changes that are going on there. On valuation report excerpts using the Pepperdine to estimate discount rate. You can download the Pepperdine report. I do that every year. And they've got, not only do they have information in there, they run through some examples of how to use this. Now, it's not recommended to use the Pepperdine report just by itself in order to determine a discount rate, but it's one of the methods you might want to consider. It's not one I mentioned earlier, but the IRS just hasn't commented on this one, and they only see it as a check when they've seen other people use this. But you have to define, and they don't define, what is private equity, what is venture capital, and what are angel investors. You can research that on your own. And they're saying this is a normal range. This isn't the full range. It's not the highest and lowest. It's the highest and lowest in a normal range. But your particular client might be beyond the range that's here. And they point out for private equity, it could be from 19.5 to 25% normally, venture capital 23 to up to as high as 51.5. That's quite a range. And then angel investors 20% to 33%. And what they do is they compare different methodologies. And they run through an example. And in that example, they started off with the lowest rate of 19.5%. And then they adjust it for size, dependence on the owner. How well is this being managed? Growth prospects for the industry, growth prospects for the company, what's its competitive position, what's the earnings capacity for the future, and what's its financial strength. And they have an example, and they're talking about private equity, and the example they use is actually outside of the normal range, 19.5 to 25%. It actually goes to 26%. So here's the actual example that they have in that article. They said, we start off with, again, the base rate, just going back, start off with the base rate, the lowest, private equity, 19.5%, and you may go up or down from there. So in the example, and again, this is an example, don't use these numbers, and the example is explained in the article or in their publication, and it explains why they did what they did. But they came and said size is, you add 3%, dependence on the owner, I'm going to add 2%, prospect for growth in the industry, 0.5%, prospect for growth for the company, 0.5%, its competitive position, 0.5%, and no change for earnings capacity or financial strength, and they came up with 26%. So you could use something like this as another one of your methods that you're using to determine what might be the cost of capital in a given situation. So something just for you to consider. I keep a copy of it, I look at it, I use it as a reference. Ideas from the trenches on growing your BV practice. This is now talking about marketing. So the number one they come up with is you have to increase your spending on marketing and in-person networking. In-person networking is the number one way for you to increase growth for your practice. Expand into different geographies and product segments. I presented recent presentations here of articles that have been written about why one firm bought another firm, looking at different elements, and this is a very common element, is there's a lot of consolidation going on in our industry. It's because one geographic area said, oh, we're in Dallas, we cover Texas, we think we might want to move into the Philadelphia, New York area. That was a primary driver. Or another element was, we thought we wanted to expand into Silicon Valley and those types of entities, so they bought an entity in Silicon Valley. And then you could come up with your own specialized valuation tool. An example of that is with Ashok Abbott, and he's got a specialized valuation tool relative to DLOMs, and he's got that out as a beta test right now. Join local organizations of professionals in estate and gift tax. There are 230 estate planning councils around the country. I market myself to them every year. I send them an email twice a year. I'll do it in January and I do it again in July. And I comment to them, would you like to have me speak to your estate planning council? For smaller ones, I'll just do it for no charge. They only have 30 or 50 members. For larger ones, I might get $2,000 or $3,000 plus travel expenses because they want to have me come and talk to their larger organization. It's a good marketing tool. So think about yourself on Join, and you can make presentations too. And in some communities, some metropolitan areas, there might be several estate planning councils. So you can check that out from the National Estate Planning Council area. But this is also true for your bar association. This can be true for your CPA organization, et cetera. And get more aggressive on pricing. Now, what does that mean? That means, from my world, getting aggressive on pricing doesn't mean lowering pricing. That's not what that means to me. Being more aggressive on pricing is, what's the value added that I bring, why you would want to hire me? So keep in mind, you think of, why would somebody want to hire you? When someone calls me, or I should say it the other way around, when I call somebody else, I think of, I'm using a book from John Baker. It's called The Asking Formula. And you can buy the book, John Baker, The Asking Formula, but know what you want, ask for it, have 3 reasons why it's beneficial for them. So I'm thinking ahead of time, what are 3 reasons why you would want to hire me, and bring that into your pricing? Become nimbler and more flexible on your marketing. I've tried a lot of things that don't work, okay? But I continue to work with things that do work for me, but what works for me may or may not work for you. And build up a tremendous referral network. I've been in business 13 years, and my spreadsheet now with different individuals that I'm in contact with is just under 30,000. That's 13 years later. So every time I got a new contact, I put in their information on their email, their name, their location of where they are, who they are. And then I used to keep phone numbers. I don't do that anymore. I just keep, I don't need that. I find I'm doing stuff by email. And if I become a client or whatever, I'll get the phone number and keep it in another thing. But I'm continually adding for who I might network with. So when you meet people, you get that business card in person. If you're at a conference, make sure you're keeping that. And then advertise strategically, whatever that might mean for you, for whatever you view your market as. Then here's private company EBITDA multiples. They're continuing an upward trend. And look at that. It almost looks like a hockey stick here. If you look at the last 3 quarters, they've got on the far right, that's second quarter of 2024. And so I go back to the fourth quarter of 2023, and the number on there was EBITDA 3.5, and then the first quarter was 4.3, and then the second quarter is 4.8. And you can see the trailing 3 quarter average, that's up over 4 at this point. So there's definitely been an increase in EBITDA multiples. That's a positive relative to the industry. And then NACVA to roll out AI data university. This is a really neat initiative by NACVA, I think. Last year, NACVA indicated they were going to be launching something here with NACVA is going to launch AI information. And why are they doing that? Because they want to stay ahead of the AI curve and support their members. So Parnell Black put out a message, written and also one you can listen to, for the third quarter. And in that he says, this is what we're doing, and anyone can join the beta testing of what they are doing. So I view that as a very positive initiative on the part of NACVA. And they put out a paper on this and made some comments about what you can use and what kind of things you want to be careful of in terms of the application with AI. Now here's links to additional resources. Here's the link to the Willamette article on jointly retained valuation engagements. You might find that to be of interest. Here's the private company EBITDA multiples from Deal Stats, if you wanted to look at those from the chart that I gave you. Here's the NACVA CEO message for the third quarter from Parnell Black, if you want to listen to that message. And then this was not part of this month's presentation, but I had it last month. But I think it's so important. This is Shannon Pratt's book. It's called the Shannon Pratt's BV Handbook for BV Professionals. Something like 38 chapters, and a number of us were asked to write a chapter for this book. But it's a great book for attorneys. Earlier today, I was on a call with 3 different attorneys, and I commented to them that I would recommend they buy this book, the BV Handbook for BV, the BV Handbook, I should say, for Shannon's Pratt BV Handbook for lawyers. My mistake, it's for lawyers. And the point on this is that lawyers need to understand BV elements, and it can help you to not have to answer as many questions because it's in the book, but it also is a way of providing them with information. If they want to look a little further and they don't want to call you on the phone, it's a great resource for them. So Shannon Pratt's BV Handbook for Lawyers, my mistake, should be for lawyers there. And if you need to get in contact with me, that's my contact information. That's my phone number. That's my email. And if I can help you with anything, the call is always complimentary. It's free. Be more than happy to help you. And with this, I'm going to pass this back to Elena. Elena?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for being with us every month. And now we have our first polling question. So make sure you respond to that. And I'm excited to introduce the next session. So I'm pretty sure with this topic that you're going to find it very insightful and engaging. So we are going to have Roberto Castro. He's one of our correspondents, and he's going to be talking with Jason Pierce. They are going to be discussing commercial damages and lost profit. So let's dive into that comment. Roberto?
Great. Thank you so much, Alina. Good morning, Jason. Good morning, NACVA members. So today's presentation will be by Jason Pierce. Jason Pierce works for Paradigm Forensics, which is based out of Maryland, in the state of Maryland. So today, what we'll do is we'll just give you some of the credentials that he has. Alina, can you see let's see, there we go. So you can see Jason is an accomplished expert in the field of forensics and valuation and fraud. And he's going to be talking about some of the main cases that he's seen and are worth noting accordingly. So let me just move forward. And let's see.
You can, Roberto, you can go through the slideshow
okay.
on top that we were discussing at the beginning. So
Let's see if I can get that right. Just bear with
If
me.
it's easier, I can get you through it.
Let's see.
So,
Let's
so
see.
go to the top and to the slideshow.
There we go. I'm going to go there. Oh, Alina, take control of that for a moment, because for some reason I had it lined up.
Okay, we can do that for you.
Oh, let's see.
But you can continue doing the
Okay.
presentation. Don't worry about it. We can see
Okay,
it.
perfect. So, well, one of the first cases that he's going to be talking about is Glattly versus Air Starter Components Incorporated. And I think, Jason, why don't you take a lead at this point and explain to us, why is that case worthy and why are you bringing it to our attention?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and thanks everybody. It's great to be here. Yeah, so part of this session for the conference is really based on a rewrite of the commercial damages, lost profits webinar series. Now that's a series that's been around for a while, and those of you who have taken that, you know, there's some, it just needed some call it innovation. And so what I wanted to do by today was kind of pitch the session, which is a pitch for the actual course. And so by virtue of that case, which we'll get to here in a second, you know, I wanted to just illustrate the concept that even though we might be experienced professionals, sometimes we fall victim to what happened in that situation. And I'll just distinguish this course, the commercial damages, lost profits, from the workshop, which is something that Laurie Maston and Michael Mulder and I put together a while back. But whether you're somebody who is looking to expand your practice to get into lost profits, or if you're a seasoned practitioner, you just want to fill in some gaps, have some tips and takeaways, but if nothing else, then there's some updates on the case law. Now, if we could pull up that slide, or I could even, I have my slides here, I could take over, I think, if that's okay, whatever makes sense. But I would like to just show a couple points on that Glattly case.
Yep. I think Alina has the case lined up here.
Okay.
Okay. And let's see. There we go. Got it, Alina?
Yes, Chanda is assisting us with that. So
Okay.
there it is.
There we go.
All right.
Thank you, Chanda. Thank you, Chanda.
And this is where it's kind of got, you saw a second ago, if we can go back one slide, I just want to put Frank's name on this as well. The co-author of the rewrite is Frank Weishart. So he and I have been at this for a while. I don't think we have I don't think we're using any of the old slides. We're just doing a complete rewrite. So yeah, we're, you know, a lot of the concepts haven't changed. You know, as we said, you know, we're trying to just update rather than innovate necessarily, but include things like Michael was just talking about, AI, and you know, some of that other stuff was business valuation related, but put a new spin on it. So yeah, if we could go 2 slides forward to that case, there we go. Yeah, so there we go. Yeah, so as you see at the reference there, this was a 2010 case. Okay, wait, you just said this was an update. Why are we talking about a 2010 case? You'll see here in a second, this was an appeals case where Air Starter was the plaintiff on the original case. They obtained a judgment, you know, 168 over the misappropriation of trade secrets, also 600,000 for torturous interference. We won't get into the particulars of how all the mechanics of this case came about, but on the appeal, so this is where it gets a little confusing. The plaintiff's expert, so plaintiff's expert was for Air Starter. Okay, cool. The takeaway that I think is relevant to today is the CPA had lost profits experience, testified that it was 1.4. Looks like, as we see, the judgment ended up being 778 or 768, excuse me. But both sides appealed, and it's chock full of interesting tidbits. And I'd say at its core was reasonable certainty. Did the expert prove their case? Now, if we go to that next slide, you'll see, yeah, this is really, I think, our takeaway as to, like, why should we care? Again, are you a seasoned professional? Are you somebody that wants to get into damages analysis? Look at some of these things. And relied on Air Starter's own assumptions. So, okay, while I like to think of the moniker trust but verify, it's okay to get information from the client, in this case the plaintiff, but then there's the diligence or the responsibility on our side to do our own analysis, do our own independent verification. And so that's an example of some of the things that we're going to talk about in this case. One of the things that jumped out to me on that case is that not only did they take some information from the owner's assumptions, the owner didn't specify whether it was gross income or profits from the customer. So should there have been expenses deducted on that information? So okay. The next one there included sales for inactive customers and unrelated customers. So that is something that could have been, or maybe should have been, analyzed by the expert, where it's like, okay, well, we have, maybe it's not a dispute that these customers existed, maybe before or back, but looking at that atrophy, or I'm not going to get it out today, but the percentage of lost sales over time, looking at things of like, hey, these may be folks that are in the marketplace, but that doesn't mean that they were customers of Air Starter. And then the next one is assuming that 100% of the sales from the owner's assumption were going to be part of that damage calculation. Again, you can see that there's a number of, call it, fact patterns that here is an experienced expert that maybe could have did a little bit more work. As you see, the defendant argued that it should have been more market share based rather than just 100%. And then the last one there is the expert used the plaintiff's average margin rather than margins of the individual products, margins of the individual customers. So taking the whole business profit percentage and using that for a specific purpose. These are the kind of things that either maybe you got some training 10 years ago, or in this case, 14 years ago. Okay, fine. Maybe it's been a while since you've had an update in the damages thing, but there's lessons in this case and beyond that we could use in our own business. And you see the court reversed the trial court's judgment and issued a take nothing judgment. So in other words, the defendant won, like Glatley was the defendant on that one. So the defendant won, but there was zero damages. So if you fast forward, go ahead, Roberto. Sorry.
Yeah, I have one comment, Jason, and that is that very often a number of the attorneys that will be retaining you as an expert don't bring you in for deposition purposes or for preparing the deposition or reviewing the information. What's your impression? I think somebody who is experienced ought to be involved in the process of discovery and also deposing people.
Well, yeah, I think, which side are you on, right? Are you on the side with the records? Are you on the side where we're trying to extract information from the business? So yeah, how involved should we be? Well, I think it's a function of the case. I don't want to say it depends on a 20-minute kind of pitch here,
right?
But it's you have clients where they just want to call you all the time. You have clients that call you on Friday and say, hey, is my report due? So I do think it's the onus is on us to, if we see that there is a discovery deadline approaching, we don't have those records. Let's get it on record that we were asking for it. Let's send some emails, make some phone calls, try to get that information. And if at worst case, hey, sorry, I can't give you an opinion because I don't have the information, don't have the time, or you don't have the budget, whatever. And so all you're going to get right now is call it a preliminary type letter because I'm just going to walk away and you guys can fire me.
Right. All right. Let's go to the next case then.
Yeah. So this was really kind of a pitch for the course. So the next case, I'll just kind of give some examples. Like these things kind of go throughout history. There's one that was a little closer to us. Sonic had a data breach, and the case was in 2020. the expert calculated $80 million on that, and the opinion said, or the judge said the opinion was not based on sufficient facts or circumstances. Just as a little teaser, and I don't have slides on this. This will be in the course, but that in that situation, that expert uses 6 financial institution to estimate the loss for 5,000 financial institutions. So the issues were unreliable statistical methods. We are going to talk about statistics, incorrect assumptions, failure to establish a causal relationship, didn't collect sufficient data. So yeah, there's lots of those type cases where we could learn from that as experts, or hopefully not make these our own mistakes and lessons learned. And then last one, in terms of case law, is one that was reported last year, Endless River Techs, TECH LLC versus TransUnion LLC. And while it's not really picking on the expert here, it's dealing with the plaintiff was awarded approximately $18 million in damages related to a breach of the contract. Okay. However, the contract between the plaintiff and the defendant had a liability clause, a limiting liability clause, which prohibited recovery of consequential damages. Okay. So if you don't know what consequential damages is, maybe that's something that you should come to the course, and we'll talk about those sort of things. So again, not to do a case law kind of update here, but if we, So the slide that's up here. So beyond just the cases, although that's relevant, is how and why experts are included. You saw from that Sonic care, part of it could be you just didn't get enough information. You didn't have that linkage between your opinion and the methodology. And so the course, you see that 4th bullet point there, is we're going to connect the dots between, okay, what is the methods? And then how do you get to your conclusion? And you'll see in a second from some of these slides, some of these are very step-by-step basis. The professional standards, you see that in other courses. So we are going to talk about it, but not necessarily at the conference, just one of those things that you can never get enough of. The legal principles regarding the recovery of lost profits damages. So what is the basis? As we see, we got proximate cause, reasonable certainty, foreseeability, mitigation. So what is the duty, as an example, what's the duty to mitigate, rather than just sit around and twiddle your thumbs and wait for the judgment to show up with your, in the case one, that Endless River, 18 million, or the Sonic Care, $80 million. Okay, what did you do about it? Right. So we want to make sure that attendees to the course understand those topics, and really, how do you kind of base the pillars of formulate the basis of your opinion? What is the evidence that you looked at, and what are the assumptions that goes into this? And not that assumptions are bad, but you just need to be able to defend it. What's the methodology that you used? And then even going into what about the actual expert themselves? How do you present as a better expert? The AICPA, for example, and the American, the accountants and the attorneys, I won't get into all that stuff, but that there was a white paper done a while back that goes into the attributes of a successful forensic accountant. And I'll just get to the punchline, which is, we need to not only be good number crunchers, but also have the ability to communicate our findings in a way that other people can understand. Right. So we're going to go through a lot of that stuff and more in the course. And then if we'll flip through some of these slides as the example. So Frank did a good job of putting this together, and we could spend probably 20 minutes alone just talking about this chart. But here's an example, how many words we got on there? Oh, how many sections? Call it 4 different sections with the breach. And I won't really get into trying to explain this in the time period that we have, but to just get a sense of okay, how do we take some of this kind of financial information, put it into a sense that either makes non-financial professionals can understand, or a judge, jury, whatnot, but be able to, but also to understand it from a attendee perspective. Like, hey, if you're looking to get into this as a potential line of work, okay, maybe you've never seen this before. And again, like some of the folks, I think Chris Hamilton says you need to get used to drawing this upside down when you're explaining this to clients. So yeah, we've got the illustrations, the examples that are updated. If we go to the next slides.
Next one, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, here's a sample example of step 1, step 2, step 3. So rather than just say, here's before and after method, or here's the yardstick, or here's the sales projection method, and so on, let's go through it step by step, make sure that the attendees understand this thing. And we're not talking about business valuation. I mean, we might, should you use the damages? Should you use business valuation as your approach? Okay, there's that, but we're getting into the actual methods that can get a sense of like, okay, I'm new to this, or I want to fill in some gaps, and now I'm gonna have some good takeaways as a result. And if we look at one more here, yeah. So here there's a case study taking some of the numbers. I teach also the math program. People want to see the numbers. So here is some of the numbers that we'll get into on the case studies. How do you dissect some of these variable, fixed, call it mixed, or partially variable expenses? We'll get into a little bit on the statistics side of things, but have some takeaways that folks can utilize. And if we look at that last slide here, yeah, here's kind of the menu. So the commercial damages, lost profits series is a 5-day, 3 hours a day. You can log in on days, 3 or 4 and or 1 and 2, whatever makes sense. But if you look at the course description on the NACVA website, you can see which days might make sense to you. Oh, maybe you've got a medical practice. Maybe you've got a restaurant damages, like construction claim or whatever. Maybe you want to learn more about business interruption or M&A disputes, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I think is exciting from my perspective is to look at it from the financial forensics, say like, okay, do we need to scrub those financials before we can run it through the damages calculation? What about occupational fraud? So we're getting into some of that stuff that that I haven't seen in some of the other courses. So I'm super excited about it, and some international aspects too. And then one, maybe this is just for Michael Gregory as well. One of the things that shows up in the damages literature is that reference manual on scientific evidence. If you don't know what that is, that could be one thing, reason alone to show up to the course. But they're getting ready to release what looks to be the 4th edition. I'm not sure when that's going to come about, but the website says that they're done. And so in the one that was issued previously in 2011, had a whole section on economic damages. So I'm very excited to see what's going to be in that, whether it's an update, whether it's a rewrite. So stay tuned on that. I'm not sure if it's going to be out before we're done with the course, but that's why we keep updating these things. So
now, Jason, you and Frank have worked on a number of cases together. Is this presentation one that you've developed together too, and
yes.
With actual case studies? Excellent. Well, you
Yes.
guys have a wealth of information and would be excellent for beginners and intermediate and experienced forensics and damages experts.
Yeah, I hope so. Yes.
I hope so. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Alina. I think we're done here, and stay tuned. NACVA, by the way, is going to have a live session coming up in about a week. Brien may have some information, or else Chinda, with regard to the presentation you're going to be making too. So heads up on that. Thank you so much, Jason.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Yep, back to you, Alina.
Thank you, Roberto and Jason. Just before we get started on the next segment, I'm just going to do a little video. Hold on one second. I want to tee this up. Let's see. Okay, let me share screen.
Hello, I'm Karen Castell with John Barkin Associates. I am very much looking forward to presenting at the upcoming Business Valuation and Financial Litigation Super Conference on Friday, December 13th. My session is going to be titled The Importance of the Engagement Foundation, Learn from My Mistakes. Whether you are just starting out or looking to improve your client engagements, this session is going to provide some real-world examples of how to set your engagements up for success right from the beginning. In the presentation, I'll be sharing insights into why proper client engagement is essential to avoid unnecessary stress for both you and your clients. We will cover how to determine if you should take on a valuation engagement, how to gather and clarify client details, and how to craft a well-structured engagement letter. We'll look at the standards and analyze important considerations for your engagement setup. I will also walk you through some of the mistakes that I've made over the years and discuss not only how you can avoid them, but should you make one, how you can recover with grace. In closing, this session is perfect for anyone looking to enhance their practice, streamline processes, improve client communication. Plus, you'll get 1 CPE for business management and organization. I look forward to seeing you there and helping you to make your engagements more enjoyable and more profitable. See you on December 13th.
All right. And with that, we're going to move to our next session, which is with our very own Brien Jones, my friend. So good to have you. Brien has been with NACVA, NACVA. He does not need an introduction, but without him, we wouldn't be moving forward. So Brien's going to talk about some industry news and some things that are going on and things you need to be aware of. Brien, I'm going to let you take it away, my friend.
Hi, Mel. Thank you. And
Good seeing
everyone,
you.
appreciate you joining our Around the Valuation World program. It's been many months, long time since I've joined the show, but glad to be here briefly with some news headlines from headquarters. As Mel mentioned, I have been around time with the association since 1997. Initially coordinating meetings, trainings, and events, but moved my role to the organization to membership, boards, committees, credentials, recertification, members, all areas of the organization. So glad to see all of you joining us with this great program. A couple of things that are new for the association. We have launched a publication called Advisory Briefs. These advisory briefs are designed to be non-authoritative guidance published by the association to give members like yourselves and others insights on practice that are not as authoritative as standards, but certainly provide guidance in different areas of practice. We have issued our very first advisory brief, the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. You can access this advisory brief by following the web's link here. And as NACVA publishes additional advisory briefs, they will be posted to the website under the nacva.com advisory brief section. We're also looking forward to hosting our annual conference in December this year. We just saw Karen LaSalle give a brief overview of the session that she will be presenting. If you're still needing CPE for your recertification compliance by the end of this year, you can register for our conference virtually or in person to attend the full conference on Thursday, December 12th and Friday, December 13th. Or you can attend only the sessions that you're interested in. For the past few years, we have offered a la carte session registrations to our conference so that if you cannot make the full conference, you can cherry pick the sessions you're interested in. And I've highlighted a few here that will be held on Thursday and Friday that might be of interest to you. They are available a la carte, most of our conference sessions, by visiting the nacva.com conference agenda. If you click on the individual session titles, you can learn more about the description of the session, the learning objectives, also the length of the session, whether it be 1 or 2 hours, and register for the sessions that you're interested in and not have to attend the full conference. But if you would like to join us in person or virtually for the conference, there's still the opportunity for you to register and join us. But just wanted to let you all know you can attend the sessions individually by a la carte registrations. For those of you who are due with your triannual recertification by the end of this year, just a reminder that December 31st, 2024 is the compliance date in order for you to avoid your credential going on inactive status. If you are due for recertification this year and need some support with your CPE, reporting it, or having questions about the policies, you can visit the NACVA.com recertification website, which lays out all the policies. But contact our headquarters team, Abby, Michael, Mark, or Ken. Any of our member client services representatives can field your questions about recertification and help you get to the finish line. If you're still needing CPE, we have on sale through the end of this month an annual unlimited CPE on-demand subscription. Our CPE on-demand library has over 700 recorded courses. Many of them qualify for NACVA CPE. You can customize your continuing education by taking courses that you're interested in through the on-demand library. We also have bonus point courses that reinforce the body of knowledge for the CVA and the math. And they give you bonus points on top of the actual CPE earned to get to the recertification finish line quicker. And you can reduce all or part of your recertification fee by taking bonus point programs. If you have taken CPE outside of NACVA, you can report or attest the CPE that you've taken to qualify for your recertification. So there's a number of ways you can do it, but be sure you do before December 31st to avoid inactive status. It's coming up fast. So if you need any help, contact our headquarters team and we'll work with you to get you through the recertification compliance. There are a lot of great experts who have partnered with NACVA over the years who have taught courses and developed courses. Many of them you learn about, hear about here on Around the Valuation World. You've had many individuals like Jason, perhaps Mel, Michael Gregory, and others who have taught courses from business valuation theory to financial forensics specialty areas, credentialing and recertification programs, and other areas of practice. We are looking to expand our group of faculty and coaches to include experts, possibly like yourself, who would be interested in teaching for the association. Benefits include being compensated for your time and development of courses, membership dues, discounted training off software databases, can enhance your brand beyond just earning a credential and being able to boast that you have a CVA or a math. You could also boast that you're an instructor for the organization. You have an opportunity to collaborate with experts, the other individuals who are teaching and developing courses for us, and the ability to pay it forward to your colleagues and younger or newer valuation experts. So if you've thought about throwing your hat in the ring to be an instructor or a course developer with the association, we encourage you to do that. There's many ways to get involved. And it's an opportunity for you to expand your brand as well as an expert in the profession. Michael Gregory mentioned during his segment that there's a lot of opportunity for you all to gain referrals. One great way for you to gain referrals is by updating your directory listing, your profile listing on NACVA's online directory. We field at headquarters on a daily basis phone calls and emails from experts and clients, potential clients who are looking to hire experts like yourself. We drive those individuals to finding experts on the NACVA's online directory. You can see here, like this member and credential holder, Jeff Harwell, has done. He has logged into his account at nacva.com. He has uploaded his picture, his website, his phone number, his areas of specialty, so that if someone were looking to hire an expert like Jeff and were to pull up his profile, they would know how to contact him, versus a whole lot of our members who haven't yet updated their profile. And so if you haven't already, we encourage you to do that, because you can be benefiting from referrals from the online directory. We also have an opportunity for you to ask the experts questions through a Q&A forum, as well as through a standards and ethics Q&A hotline. If you have particular questions that you want answers to, our standards board fields the questions and provides responses to the members and individuals who post these questions for support and for guidance. There's also on the website FAQs, so that the questions that are posed to our standards board, the answers are posted to an online portal so that you can view the historical list of questions that have been posed to our boards. But if you're not aware that you have the opportunity to ask the experts and get answers directly from them, I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well. And that's really all I have to say for today. I want to again thank you all for joining Around the Valuation World. We appreciate your membership. We're here to support you. And please take advantage of those benefits. And I'll look forward to joining you at another time with some more updates from the association. Alina?
Thank you, Brien. I'm one of those that are grateful for you, because I remember when I started in the association, it was because of you, actually. You were always so nice to me. So thank you.
Look at you now.
Yes. So thank you.
You're
and
welcome,
for everyone else, you have the polling question. So this is our third one. And now we are going to go to another person who also embraced me from the beginning, and that is our next correspondent, is Janae. So she's going to be chatting with our awesome judges about the wonders and challenges of discovery. So I'm sure it's going to be a great discussion. So Janae?
Excellent. Thanks so much, Alina. I'm glad to have all three of our judges here from the American College of Business Court judges. We've got Judge Driscoll, Judge Platt, and Judge Yates. So I will open up the discussion. I've got their bios on some of the following slides that you can watch in further, and I'll show those as we begin to start talking in our discussion. But they're all very experienced, and they always have great insight for us. So I wanted to ask you all, our theme for today is Discovery, Wonders, and Woes. And I wanted to ask you to start off, is it better? I find myself wondering very often when I'm discussing with attorneys our discovery strategy or what I need. Is it better to ask for every possible document and piece of information that I can dream of or that I think I might possibly need to cover all my bases up front or at the outset of discovery? Or is it better to kind of make several requests, kind of dribble it out, make a basic request and then make another request and then potentially another request and make lots of follow-on requests to hone in on what we need? Which in your case is better, or are there pros and cons to each?
So I love that question. And if I can continue with this compliment tour that seems to have been started with Alina complimenting Brien. Now, Janae, I will compliment you, and I think I'll do so on behalf of Judge Yates and Judge Platt. These are great questions. Every question we get in our AVW monthly segment are fantastic and thought-provoking. These are particularly thought-provoking because they really tie into what we do as judges and, quite frankly, what we don't want to do as judges. So let me start with my view of discovery disputes, getting to when something doesn't happen that should be produced. For me, discovery disputes are like root canal. Root canal is never welcome, but it's sometimes necessary. And so too is that my view of weighing into discovery disputes. I don't have all the time in the world to weigh into, do I get document request 1 or do I get that interrogatory response? So I offer that 30,000-foot start as a way of answering your question with the wonderful lawyer's answer of, should you ask for everything all at one time or should you dribble it in? It depends. Now, mostly I would say ask for it all at the outset. As Billy Joel said, get it right the first time. Get it the first time, because the more you're dribbling in the requests, the more that is taking retaining counsel's time to do that. And the retaining counsel has to send a bill to his client or her client. And the client isn't excited about that. Why couldn't you ask for that all at once? So I would say the default setting is to ask for everything you could possibly want at the outset and have retaining counsel, press that on your behalf. That being said, my caveat is if there is a certain subset of discovery that you might be able to obtain that would bring the case to resolution more quickly. I'm thinking particularly in terms of settlement more quickly. If there is settlement-related discovery, if there's a specific aspect of the business you're valuing, or a specific question as to whether one of the potential owners has 10% or 20%, if you could really hone in on that, I think that might be where a more piecemeal approach might be appropriate. But short of that, I think you're only increasing the expense of discovery and increasing the time of the discovery.
Okay.
I'd like to build on what Judge Driscoll said. As a general matter, obviously you'd like to have all the documents in your hand as soon as you can. The only concern that I have as a judge is if you make a very broad discovery request, it's much more likely to be challenged as unduly burdensome. And then you're going to get caught up in rounds going back and forth. If you know what you really need, the more targeted a discovery request, the less likely a judge is going to be to entertain an argument that the request is unduly burdensome. The other thing I'd add to that is under the federal rules, and in our state and in many states now, there are mandatory initial disclosures that have to be made. And that should help you target more effectively and get some materials right out of the box. But please bear in mind that of the 3 basic discovery tools you can use, interrogatories, request to admit, and request for production. Request for production, in my view, are by far the best. And then when you move to the next stage and you have depositions, you're in a much better position to move forward. I've always found interrogatories to be largely useless and generally a source of contention. So if you want to go right to the motion for production, that's probably a wise way to go.
If I could build on what both Judge Driscoll and Judge Yates, from my perspective, I think it's well settled law that judges, as Judge Yates alluded to, hate interrogatories, and as do lawyers. But in a world that's, in my opinion, changing, it depends. The it depends question also. It depends on what you're being hired to do and when you're being hired to do it. If you're being hired to by retaining counsel to evaluate the case for settlement, then what you need is probably a little less than what you need if you're going to be testifying in a courtroom or even in an arbitration. The other thing I would caution is, and this is more of a caution for the retaining counsel, but if the retaining counsel has a choice of blaming you or blaming themselves for some sort of tactical request for information, my money would be on blaming you. So don't do that. If he or she wants to do that, that should be in their name, not yours. But for lack of a better way to describe it, quantifying what this case is worth to settle is different than quantifying parts or all of the case for presentation in a courtroom or even in an arbitration conference room. So figure out what you need and do that with a purpose in mind, usually driven by the stage of the proceedings.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay, so considerations made, and it's not always, I don't believe, in our hands as expert witnesses, but to keep in mind perhaps the cost of making additional requests versus the likelihood of a discovery request or a request for production being deemed unduly burdensome. That's kind of the factors that we're having to balance, and that's what I'm hearing you say. Great. I think that's helpful. My next question is, and you kind of alluded to this, Judge Platt, should an expert be involved in making discovery requests, even if they're, informally made, say an email, maybe it's not in a formal request for production, but is that something that the expert should be involved in?
When you say involved, you mean pled?
Making
Because
the
the only
request.
people that can request information in a case are the parties through counsel, assuming they have counsel. So you can't do that, and unless there's some rule that state that I'm not aware of that allows you to do that. So you're doing it through retaining counsel 100% of the time. That said, you should obviously be involved because the information being requested is for you to do what you're being hired to do, and you can't do it if you don't have it. And you should not assume that retaining counsel knows what you need. In fact, it's more likely that they do not know what you need. That's why you got hired. And again, for what purpose? If you render an opinion, as one of your later questions will suggest, and doesn't really need to, it's presumed that if you render an opinion based on a lack of information or a lack of essential information, you will be crossed on it, you will be blamed for it, and ultimately, if it costs the case, again, if the choice is either you or me, it's always you. So the answer is you should be involved, but you should be involved as the rules allow.
Right. My best advice to you is come up with a list of the items you need, communicate that to retaining counsel in a way that's documented. An email is fine. You don't have to send a letter, return receipt request, or some crazy thing like that. But email will be fine. And then you have to be persistent about it. Leave it up to your retaining counsel to figure out how best to get it. Often, particularly in commercial litigation, when you have attorneys who are used to dealing with each other, they'll freely exchange some things without a discovery request at all. But it's your job to make sure that you have everything in your hands that you need. It's up to your retaining counsel to figure out how to get those things to you.
And the idea of talking to opposing counsel, I would be very reluctant, if I were an expert, to speak to any lawyer other than retaining counsel. Yep. And for those of you who are on our broadcast today, who are either social friends or relatives with attorneys, you know what happens. Your words get turned around very quickly. My wife knows that not to have an argument with me when I'm in full litigation mode, because I'll just keep cross-examining, right? So there you are speaking to opposing counsel who doesn't have your interests at heart, and you're asking for something, and you don't know if her paralegal is listening as part of the conversation. And next thing you know, you have a witness to the conversation who may or may not bring that conversation to the judge down the road. So let the lawyer, let retaining counsel do their job. You do your job. Now, that said, still be persistent with retaining counsel if you don't get what you want, but let retaining counsel speak in that litigation arena. Your arena is the valuation arena or the expert arena.
Great. So what prompted some of these questions? I had a case, and I feel like for me, it was very unusual. But I had retaining counsel charge me and say, well, I need you to make email requests and follow-ups on getting this information, and more or less wanted me to badger, I think, the other attorney. And I'm like, I'm not completely sure what to do with it. It's like,
that would give incompetence and laziness a new dimension.
Right. I mean, if they're going to farm something like that out, farm it out to a paralegal in the firm, not to a retained expert. I can't imagine any situation, as Judge Driscoll warned, where you would want to start doing that.
Yeah, no, I definitely did not want to.
And if you have that situation, that's the time again to get your big person pants on and say, hey, there's risks for me if I do have that conversation, and thus risks for our collective clients in that conversation could be recorded or reflected by someone on opposing counsel side in a way that might not help the client retaining counsel. So again, there's a reason why I'm resistant. There's a reason why I'm not doing this. It's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I'm accusing you of being lazy, although as Judge Platt said, that perhaps might be an appropriate accusation, but it's because it's not good for the client.
Yeah, right.
Great. So you've mentioned some about following up with your retaining counsel. Any other caveats or guidance to give experts on how to handle missing information that has been requested?
Don't put yourself in a position where you're looking for a chair when the music stops, because as Judge Platt said, we lawyers, boy, we're really good with our words, and we're really good about twisting words, using language appropriately, right? So we, meaning the lawyers, are gonna point to you if something goes wrong. So cover yourself along the way. I'm not suggesting an adversarial relationship with opposing counsel. As Judge Yates said, you don't need to be sending a certified letter, return receipt requested. But if you need something and you're not getting it, make sure you have that track record of what you're asking for in a pointed, albeit measured way. Dear retaining counsel, I asked for this 2 weeks ago. I really need this. Here's why I need this, as we discussed. Please let me know when I'm going to get it. So cover yourself along the way would be a bit.
One piece of advice I'd give you is, particularly at larger law firms, paralegals often have a much better idea of what's going on in discovery than your retaining counsel. Your retaining counsel often swoops in whenever there's a key deposition to be done or a motion that needs to be argued, but the paralegals generally are the front line on discovery. And so if you can acquaint yourself with the lead paralegal on whom your retaining counsel is relying, chances are you'll get answers faster and they'll be much more sophisticated, because paralegals tend to be light years ahead of many lawyers in terms of understanding electronic discovery.
Well, and the other thing is, again, on that subject, not only should you, there's an old saying, you know your judge, know your jury. We should also know your retaining counsel. If your retaining counsel is inexperienced and or is dishonest, and the two don't necessarily go together, but they can. And if he or she has decided that the way to get the opinion they want is not tell you something or not provide information or even false information, you need to be on the lookout for that. And you don't need to be looking at it 100% of the time. If you're dealing with the firm that's a large enough a firm that has paralegals, so be it. But be careful, because that happens. And when it does, disaster strikes, and then the blame game starts.
Okay. You made me, I didn't give you guys this question to think about beforehand, but as you're discussing, it made me think of another issue that comes up fairly commonly for me, and especially with electronic discovery. And what I get a lot of times is that attorneys have made data requests, or there's been an exchange of documents and information, and they have, a catalog and kind of an online compendium, for lack of a better word, of all the documentation that's been exchanged. And they may say, okay, here, before you make a request, or even after you've made a request, here's, everything that we've gotten in discovery, go look through it and see if, that gives you the information that you need. My question is, with all of that documentation, there's some that's useful to me, and then there's a lot that's extraneous for my purposes. When I'm filling out something, a disclosure of what I've relied upon for my opinion, it has usually been my practice to give the documents that I actually really relied on. Even if I reviewed some, if I didn't feel like they were helpful or contributed to my opinion, I may not necessarily reference them. And my thought has been that, if it didn't form a basis or foundation for my opinion, then I don't want to put it in and get questions asked about it and things kind of appearing to be a bigger deal and they're not. but I do always worry, should I have put basically everything in that I could have looked at? Do you have guidance in that respect?
So you're cross-examining a bunch of judges now, Janae. That's great. That's great. The one thing we're not used to is pop quizzes. So this is fascinating. So I'm going to love hearing what my colleagues are saying on this. I would say, I would disagree with your approach.
Okay.
I think it's better to say what you reviewed, because that's part of your opinion, in that it's not your opinion because of what you reviewed.
Right.
I know it might lead, I'd be concerned with, oh, Ms. Castell, okay, so you say you reviewed all this as forming your opinion. Did you review X, Y, Z? Well, I did. Well, that's not on there.
Right.
And then that's not on there. And then you're waiting to say, but it wasn't part of my opinion, but it wasn't my opinion. And all the trier of fact is hearing is, oh yeah, she's not complete. She's not complete. She's not complete. Easier to explain away in a bench trial for obvious reasons. But in a jury trial, I don't know if you want that sequence of, oh, you didn't list that, but you reviewed it. You didn't list that, but you reviewed it. You didn't list that. I'd be concerned with that.
Yeah, I agree completely with Judge Driscoll. My view is that you want to appear to have done every last bit of preparation you possibly could do. And so when you're forming conclusions, they're based upon the full record. I've seen some really effective cross-examination of experts about the fact they didn't read depositions or something like that. And a good lawyer can make that look like a really glaring omission in your preparation. You never want to set yourself up for that.
You can always say, my opinion is based on the following. I also looked at everything else, but I did not find whatever you just described as everything else to be helpful in my opinion, which is why I didn't focus on it in my previous testimony.
Yeah, that's very good advice. As always, Judge Platt nails it.
Great. So make sure I list everything I touched. What if I could have looked at it, but I didn't look at it? Or just make sure I look at it, because I could already.
At least pass your eyes over it. I mean, if you think it's completely irrelevant, just familiarize yourself with it enough to know that, yes, your instinct that it's irrelevant is in fact correct.
You got it because somebody, presumably retaining counsel, thought that it might be helpful. So to the extent that that's necessary, and probably got at least some of what we're talking about from opposing counsel, so they all know about it. If they know about it, you don't want to discount it and not mention it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Fair enough. It does. Sometimes there are other experts or different issues involved. It may not have something to do with me. And that's kind of where I've kind of run into this, where it's not them showing me what I've requested or what they think is necessarily relevant to my portion of the case. And they're often,
I would think my colleagues would agree there's no presumption of fairness in cross-examination.
No, not at all.
Okay, great advice. We've got a couple of minutes, and I know I had sent some extra questions, and I hope to continue this discussion a little bit more on discovery in maybe a future interview. So if anybody listening has had a particularly interesting issue with discovery that they'd like answered, I'm open to having that. But in the last couple of minutes, any last bits of advice? I think we've gotten a really good message so far in just the questions that you've answered.
Yeah, be firm with what you want. As Judge Platt had said so perfectly, opposing counsel is going to, retaining counsel, opposing counsel, of course, is going to point the finger at you. You don't need retaining counsel pointing the finger at you also. So say what you want and cover yourself along the way. I just want to reiterate those points.
Right. And my experience with discovery, particularly if one side is being difficult, just turns into mud wrestling, and you don't want to be a part of that. You really don't. It's not your obligation to get in there and trade blows with people. They have a whole team of people at the retaining counsel firm. In most instances, they have those fights.
That's actually Judge Platt's line. If when you roll around in the mud with a pig, you'll get dirty and the pig will enjoy it. So I'm sorry that was Judge Platt's beautiful line that he's used so many times, and I love it.
And pigs dress accordingly.
Okay, wonderful. I appreciate your time again, as always. And I want to ask Michael Kaplan, if you have had any particular particularly insightful or interesting discovery woes in your illustrious career?
Discovery woes are part of the game, are part of the profession. We can't avoid them. And I want to thank our judges for just outstanding insights relating to discovery.
Yeah.
Now, in the world of discovery, in the world of documents, in the world of evidence that we as experts need to look at, I know what I need. I'm the expert. I need what I need. I want what I need. And all of that is not negotiable. So I am going to give my retaining counsel a list of what I need, and I'm going to tell her or I'm going to tell him, go get it. And you go through all your legal stuff, whatever it takes to get it. Now, I may distill some of it out. There may be some I discover is less helpful, some I discover may be irrelevant. Many things are important to what I'm doing, but I have to decide that. Because when I'm on the witness stand, I don't want to have to deal with the issue of having subordinated my own professional judgment to someone else who doesn't have the professional background that I do. The attorneys deal with the legal issues. I deal with the damages issues. I deal with the valuation issues. I deal with the issues of my profession. And I know what I need. And where do we get into trouble? We get into trouble when we depart from our professional standards. And the last time I looked at the professional standards, there was one that said we rely upon sufficient relevant data. And professional judgment is an important element. So we run into discovery problems when we depart from that. I could spend the rest of the day, and I know no one would be happy if I took up the rest of the time. But one of the matters that I think I spoke about in an earlier session was a valuation case that I was brought into. I was asked to value a 35% interest in a restaurant, in an entity that held a restaurant. I was working on behalf of counsel for the minority member of this particular LLC. Somewhere along the way, when we were doing our discovery, we discovered we were provided with the second set of books. Now, I know how hard this is to believe, but sometimes there's a second set of books. And I had these and I said, oh my God, someone we just hit gold here. But I need to look into it. I can't make assumptions. So what I did was I prepared a discovery request. I prepared a list of all the documents that I wanted to see, questions I needed answered, particularly as relates to differences between the first set of books and the second set of books. And I provided those to my retaining counsel, who served discovery on opposing counsel. And my retaining counsel got a lot of pushback. And we just didn't get the documents that we needed. And my position was, I need them. I didn't give you this to explore whether I need them or not. I need them in order for me to formulate a conclusion of the value of this business. I need these documents, and I never got them. I never got answers to questions. I never got the documents. And I went to my retaining counsel and I said, there is no way that I can complete my assignment, my engagement of opining as to the conclusion of value of this company. And I said, what I can walk into the courtroom and say, I have nothing. I don't have an opinion, or I can make reasonable assumptions. I can look at the documentation that I have. I could speak with the party, with your client, who is the party on whose behalf I am testifying. I can get information and I can do what we call a calculation of value. But again, I'm going to use my best judgment. I've been in this business for a zillion years, and if you want to rely upon that, if you're willing to, and that's my recommendation, I can walk into the courtroom and have a number. And that's what I did. And my retaining counsel, by the way, when my retaining counsel took the deposition of the expert on the other side, the guy said, I don't understand what Kaplan's talking about. What do you mean he can't do a conclusion of value? I did a conclusion of value, and on and on and on and on. Well, in the courtroom during the trial, the principal of the company, the 65% member of this LLC, testified that his accountant was the one who had all the information, had all the documents, had everything that I needed that was on my discovery list. And the other individuals testified, yeah, that the accountant was the only person who had this documentation, the only person who had these answers. So my retaining counsel subpoenaed the accountant to come into court to testify as a hostile witness. And my retaining counsel put her on the stand. And she had the same answer to each question that she was asked. And you probably have some sense of what that answer is. And that answer is, I invoke my rights under the Fifth Amendment
Exactly.
of the Constitution of the United States. Okay? And we heard that over and over and over again. And that just set the stage for my testimony. So when I was put on the stand to give my opinion, and I'm going to cut through to the bottom line, I said, Your Honor, that information that I needed in order to formulate an opinion as to the conclusion of value, this one person was the only one who had it, according to all the people on the other side. This was the one person who had it, and she was the one that we heard invoke the Fifth Amendment. Your Honor, when I tell you I needed this information and I didn't have it, I didn't have it. I didn't have it. So what I did was, in my best professional judgment, I did an analysis that we call a calculation of value based upon my 30, 40, whatever number of years of experience I had in the business at that time, and reasonable assumptions and input from those individuals, those knowledgeable individuals that I had access to. And this is what the number is. By the way, the judge embraced my number. The judge embraced my number, but I was insistent on having all of that stuff before I formulated an opinion of the conclusion. If I had done a conclusion without all of that, I would have been just a sitting duck that opposing counsel could have cross-examined me and unraveled me. And I don't do that. You know, there's this embracing professional standards, using my best professional judgment. And we all need to do this. And I'm sure that all of those of us on the panels here today, and for the most part, and hopefully everyone who is attending this today, subscribes to and embraces the highest level of professional standards, because that's where it is. I know what I need. I need what I need. That's not negotiable. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I thank our judges especially for telling it like it is and sending us that message that we need to hear.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you all so very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
all.
much.
Always such a great session, and thank you, Mike, for bringing it home for us and kind of being real direct about it. And I think that's, matter of fact, what we have to do to protect the longevity in this business. So with that, let's move to our next session with Charles Persing. We're going to talk about a recent case, Connelly versus the U.S. and the elements of value and how it affects our valuation. Charles is a partner in the accounting and advisory firm of, hopefully I do this right, Peterson LLP, and a subchapter 5 trustee in the Eastern and Southern Districts of New York. Deals with the firm's insolvency and litigation team, and is a financial advisor to Chapter 7 trustees in the Mid-Atlantic region. Charles, it is so cool to have you here and have you with us on AVW, and I look forward to hearing your presentation. I'm going to have you see if you can do a slide swap, because we're seeing your presenter view versus the actual slides. All right. There we go. Awesome. Now I don't hear you and I don't see you, so hopefully that's Ed.
All right. Am I on now?
Oh, I see Ed, but I can hear you, Charles.
Okay, hold on. I can hear you too.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
All right, very good. All right, so good. So I it's a hard act to follow. This is my first time doing one of these, and I'm just already hitting the technical issues. I got to start my video, so excuse me. All right. So many of you will be saying, well, what does a sub-chapter 5 trustee and then an advisor to Chapter 7 trustees have to do with valuations? And the answer is, I could quote my cousin Vinny where she said nothing, but that's not true. A lot has to do with the valuation. Obviously, chapter trustees and creditors are trying to find value of assets. So we're well versed in valuation and solvency opinions and that sort of thing. So I do appreciate that. This is a recent case, and that was deemed to be long decided over the years by other cases, and so it is an interesting case in terms of all of a sudden this pops into the screen. This case is a 10-year-old case. I think it was 2015, and so it's one of those cases that just popped up for a number of reasons. And I guess the main takeaway is in these insurance-funded buy-sell agreements that shareholders have enacted, one basic way to not run afoul is actually follow the agreement. And I don't know about many of you guys, but I don't think I've ever had a shareholders agreement and then asked for a copy of the agreement and asked for the certificates of valuation and received any, except for the first one. And so that was one of the issues that the court cited in this case. It called for an annual statement of value, or it called for valuations at the time of death, and neither of those were filed. And I don't think the court effectively said that these deals don't work, but the basis would be to start to actually follow the agreement. And there's some technical things in there, but so from that standpoint, I think the effect on these funds is going to have your clients and their counsels relook at their agreements involving insurance and redemption of shares, and make sure that they're following those agreements and follow forward. The other thing is some of these may not work, and so there's going to be a whole host of new ideas to try to fund the share buyback in terms of a insurance funded transaction that get a little more duplicated and have their own tax effects. If you've got 4 or 5 shareholders and everybody owns their own insurance on their other partners. Maybe they all won't keep them up. Maybe they won't. Or then they have to get those funds out, and they're going to have to pay taxes on it to buy those insurances. So it is going to be an interesting situation. But let me tell you a little bit about the case. The case history. It started, or I guess the 11th Circuit actually in 2005 actually had a decision that seemed to solve this issue, as I said earlier. The present case is kind of interesting that all parties that have agreed to the values, and I'll show you that later, and right up the line, they lost the positions. The district court asked two questions. Was the stock purchase agreement effective to determine the price under Section 2703 of the IRS code? And 2703 has three prongs, so to speak. Is fixed and determinable price offering. The agreement must be binding during the lifetime and after death. And was there a bona fide business reason? Well, as you can imagine, the courts disagreed with the Blau case from 2005 and said that a hypothetical buyer would not factor the company's redemption of the shares when they were buying the company. And it makes sense. I've done valuations over the years, and the company's had excess working capital, excess assets, sometimes lucky enough to have excess cash, and you would value the base business and then value those additional assets. Now, you may have different discounts on those assets because the minority shareholder may not have access on those, but they were certainly included in those valuations. And if for some reason, while they were determining to buy the company, buy the shares back from the deceased shareholder, and someone come in and said, "I'll buy all the shares," well, they're not going to take a deduction for that $3 million in this case, or even $3.5 million in this case. So that was the two issues there. Does it meet on the district court for 2703, and do the life insurance proceeds need to be calculating in the value of the company? I guess the one caveat I would suggest to you is when you're doing these estate valuations, you know, if you're not all over the agreements and all over the adherence to the agreements, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail. And so certainly those cases, and I have a case now where I'm actually just advising on what the purchase price should be, and there was supposed to be an annual certificate, and voila, there's not. So that's important. The Eighth Circuit had a little bit different proceeds, but they also looked into 2703, and they basically came in to the same sort of thing. They also quoted Section 2031 about value of non-operating assets, like life insurance proceeds should be considered, and that's what I talked about earlier. We've typically asked those same questions when we're doing valuations. I always do. I don't know about you guys, but I always look at the working capital and the other assets and see if that needs to be an additional add back to the value. And then obviously the Supreme Court, I think, came to the same conclusions, a little nuanced, a little differently, but they also stated that there could be reasons where the redemption obligation would factor in and reduce the value of the shares. And let's say the insurance wasn't enough money and they had to sell a piece of their business to fund that proceeds. Well, that would change the value of the company. Or fund the purchase price. So they're not saying that you can't do it. I think all courts said they need to follow the deal, and I guess the nuance is if the deal made sense, if it meets the three prongs there. So that's an important issue. We just move this side a little bit. Again, two brothers. I'll just go a little into some detail. Michael, who was the deceased shareholder, owned 77% of the shares. His brother Thomas owned the 23%. It was interesting to note that, as again, they didn't do the annual price agreement. They didn't do the at least two appraisals of the stocks at the time of death, and in fact, they did nothing to value the shares except the deceased shareholder's sons negotiated with the minority shareholder, their uncle, and came to a value. And that was a little bit interesting too, because the insurance proceeds were $3.5 million, and the price agreed upon was $300,000. So it was kind of interesting in a company that was valued, for all practical purposes, 6.8 million, that they needed $500,000 for working capital. So it is kind of interesting as a value, and obviously you don't get a chance to look at all the underlying documents in these cases, but I thought that was interesting in the value, and it seemed to me that the IRS didn't dispute the value. They disputed the lack of, or the deduction for the proceeds paid to the estate. So that was kind of an interesting thing that they both agreed on the value. Although I kind of thought that it was a little weird that $500,000 on a company that's worth $6 million, $3 million without the proceeds was really worth $3 million. But that's just me being two numbers oriented, not having seen the valuation. And it was also very interesting that they both had the same amount of insurance. So if Thomas died, would his estate get $3 million? That's my question. That wasn't in any of the documents, but that was interesting to me also, where the insurance level was the same, which leads me to believe that they really weren't considering all the aspects of the shareholders agreement that was done. Who knew how many years in advance? Next is the kind of the numbers, which is interesting. The only difference is the $3 million. The other situation was they actually obtained an evaluation during the suit that came up to the same number. Nice little neat world with that a bow being wrapped around everything. Don't know if the $3 million was quoted in the valuation, and part of the valuation analysis was done, or was it advised by the counsel? And so one of the issues I think we all have to be aware of is in a case like this with the estate issues, that we get our hands around the attorney and actually see what the attorney's doing. Now I'm trying. Somebody raised their hand, and I got to see what they said. Maybe I'm talking too fast or not clear enough. Hold on. Let me see one thing. How can I see?
Chuck, I just see that they raised their hand, but I don't see any questions that came in from them.
Okay. I feel like at school I would raise my hand and the teacher wouldn't say anything either. But thank you for that. Knowing what's happening with the council is, I think, important. Ultimately, they or some other professional file the estate tax returns, and knowing what your reports, where your report goes and what it looks like in the report is something that I try to figure out too. What the tax return is going to look like and what they've done with the numbers. But it's interesting that these things all lined up. The IRS didn't debate the value of the numbers, and if you can hear some noise in the background, I'm in a temporary office, and no one was here all day long, and now someone's drilling. So forgive me for that. Let me see. Go to the next slide. So this is kind of recapping some of the things, but they didn't adhere to the agreement. I don't necessarily know if this agreement was right on all points. The district court did say that it didn't meet two of the prongs. The Supreme Court's opinion did indicate that it could happen had they followed an agreement. So, but it is interesting that they didn't do all these things, and I think one commentary that I read said that if they followed the agreement, this way would not even be a part of it wouldn't even been objected to by the IRS. And in fact, I'll tell you a funny little thing. When I first looked at this case, I said, this is just a tax grab by the IRS. And then the more I read the stuff and looked at it, I said, I kind of agree with their opinion. In this case, if they're not following the appropriate IRS codes, why would someone sell the shares? And I think if I go back to the last case, why would Michael's estate sell the shares for $3 million that a third party would pay $5.2 million? So it is kind of interesting to speak of in that sense. So, but and again, I'm still concerned about the $500,000 going elsewhere to fund operations and what effect that really had on value. So I think some of the points are that as a valuation analyst, we need to really understand the buy-sell redemption agreements, and they're being followed. Certainly, if there's some technical issues with them, counsel's really got to weigh in for that. You shouldn't be afraid to answer those questions. And in some cases, you're asked to do the valuation, and you're not even 100% sure what what's going to be valued. You know the interest to be valued, but you don't know what's actually going to happen to the shares. And I could see a situation where an attorney would take your valuation, assuming the value of the insurance, and then file a tax return deducting it. So and this case to me brings something that I don't always do, sometimes do, is you almost have to do a search for court cases and whatnot to find out what code sections have implications on the evaluation. So looks like we've got some interruption on the screen. So you may want to look at your screen and see what's happening. But I think on balance, I really concur with the ruling. As I said earlier, I think that a rational seller wouldn't sell the business at such a low price to a third party. They'd want to get the full amount. So I think that at first, again, I thought the ruling was a bad ruling. Not suggesting that the court or the judges were incorrect, just from my point of view, and I certainly now agree with that. So that's kind of where we're at on that. I do think that the effect of this evaluation, this ruling, may not be as large as we and dramatic as we thought, because if you have a state under the value, it's certainly in this case it wouldn't be a problem, because I think it's currently $13.6 million. Even if it was cut in half, you'd be slightly above that value anyway. So or almost right on it. I guess 6.8 times 2 is 13.6. So many of the smaller business owners that we deal with would not have this issue, but I think all things being equal, the values need to be include the value of the insurance, and have counsel weigh in if you really think there's a reason it shouldn't be. And the whole thing is, if you go back to my schedule with the values, why would he take $2.3 million lower? I just don't see that as making any sense. Let's see.
Hello, Chuck. Hey, Chuck.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. We are about 6 minutes over, so if we can please wrap up, just so we can give time for our last presenters before then. So,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go too long.
Yeah, no.
I thought I was running out of time. Let me see. Well, so the buy-sell agreements are going to have to be revalued, and not being a state council, there's a number of ways to do that. I probably reiterated myself a number of times, but when you're doing evaluation of business with state purposes, you really need to know more about the insurance and whatnot. And even though I'm on the standards committee, and I will tell you, when I got the call to run again, because I was in the ethics board and I had a great time with that, I think I left the ethics boards when Mike Gregory joined. It's really improved my ability. So all the standards apply. I wasn't really going to list all the issues, because I think doing the valuation makes following the standards is not any different than in this case, except maybe you want to check out the IRS codes a little more. So that's basically where I am. So again, Charles Persing, I'm on the East Coast in New Jersey, sometimes in New York. Any questions about bankruptcy, insolvency, or valuations? I'd certainly take any of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chuck. We appreciate your time. So now we have Ed Mofrad, who will be chatting with David and Nainesh about Seek Water for excellent work. So Ed, over to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Alina. I know we're short on time. We only got, by my watch, only about 7 minutes. So I'm going to really rush through this. I'm Ed Mofrad from Mofrad Financial Solutions in Los Angeles, California, tax, valuation, accounting, financial advisements. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. David Fein and Nainesh Shah in what they call a Sync Warrior interview. Let me give you a brief bio of each. David calls himself an adventurer. He is an entrepreneur. At 16, he became the second youngest person to set foot on the South Pole. How cool is that? At 20, he sailed to Tahiti in a 34-foot sailboat. In 1986, he co-founded Valuations, which produces the #1 best-selling business valuation and economic damages calculation software. David is the co-founder and the head of Christmas Tree Project, which provides decorated Christmas to families in need in the U.S. and around the world. How cool is that, David? David has a bachelor's degree in computer science and an MBA. Of course, with all the stuff you've done, you probably haven't had time for much else. Now, Nainesh Shah. Nainesh is a CFA and certified and CBA, like me, like most of us here. He has over 25 years of experience in valuing complex assets. I guess you're not so much of an adventurer like your friend is. A co-founder and director of valuation advisory at Committee Advisors. He specializes in providing valuation services for diverse needs, such as estate planning, M&As, and financial reporting. Super smart. Nainesh has a proven track record of analyzing businesses, intellectual property, and alternative investments, utilizing his experience, or his expertise rather, in financial modeling, risk management, and market analysis. He leverages his deep understanding of quantitative theories, statistical methods, and industry dynamics to provide comprehensive and inside valuations. And it really is my pleasure to interview both of you today. So I'm going to start my questions. Again, we don't have much time. I'm sorry about that, gentlemen. David, my first question is for you. How did ValueSource get into the report writing business?
Well, it was a very long time ago. 1986, we produced our first valuation product. It was called the Expert Witness, and it was an Excel Lotus, or it was a Lotus 1A spreadsheet. And people liked it, and people wanted to automate this, complex process of business valuation. So after a couple of years of selling that and supporting that, we found people asking us, can you give us some help with the report? In other words, these are financial people, valuators, spreadsheets were easy, but reports were more complicated. So we came out with our first DOS-based report writer in, I don't know, it was 1990, I guess. And it was just created a flat file that, sort of plugged numbers in, kind of a mail merge, but people really appreciate it. So that was our first entree into report writing.
Awesome. Nainesh, why do you think automation is important to evaluators? Again, I'm sorry, I'm going so quickly, but.
No, it's totally, people are waiting for their coffee. So look, I am an early technology adopter. You go back to days of PC and then internet and cell phones. I think automation really helps. You look at large companies like, take example of Walmart. The reason Walmart did so well against other companies is because of automation. And I think if in our field, in valuation field, if we can add automation, we can do so much better for client and the quality of report.
David, a name like Sync or a phrase like Sync Warriors is so becoming of you, a warrior adventurer. What is Sync Warrior? Tell us about it. How does it work?
Well, from our early days in the 90s of a DOS report writer, it evolved. So we have a valuation platform that does obviously valuation analysis. It does data integration. And the third piece is report writing. So for decades, we've had an integrated report writer into our platform, which people have really appreciated. It helps automate that process. But we realized a couple things. One, there's a lot of people that don't use our valuation software, and they wanted a tool to automate the report writing piece of that. So Sync Warrior, we took the best of what we've learned in the last 3 decades on automating reports for valuators and built it into Microsoft Word and Excel. So in other words, you don't need our stuff. It's just it's an Excel and a Word add-in, and it lets you do that with your own spreadsheets instead of ours.
Nainesh, thank you, David, for that answer. I'm going 100 miles an hour here. Nainesh, what is the biggest challenge your firm faces in automation?
Look, the biggest challenge is to bring everybody on the same page. Some people are early adopters and some people are late adopters. And late adopters doesn't want automation as fast. So you have to bring everybody on the same page. You have to figure out what are the standard processes. You have to figure out, what are the challenges that you want to solve, and then putting the effort to add automation in your processes. Not easy, but once it's done, it makes life much better.
Okay, well, and I imagine you'll be there to guide people who will use this, right? You or your staff, your team will be there to guide them.
Say that again?
If let's say some people decide to use the software, you and your team will be able to help them to implement.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been using this Sync Warrior for the last couple of years, maybe longer. And if anybody have a question, definitely can help. What also we can do is I have a template that took a lot of time, and that's the challenge with automation. Is initially you're trying to save time for future, but you have to put in a lot of time upfront to save time in future. And so I can help. I can share my templates and guide people through. And I'm sure, David, you can, your team can help get some templates done, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And actually what we do is we'll do the template for you. So in other words, if you have and we've done this for tons of people. If you have an Excel file that you're using in a Word report, we'll sync warriorize it and hook it all up and give it back to you. So you don't have to figure all that out. It makes it very simple.
Okay, David, Sync Warrior, how is that different from other valuation report writers?
Well, our current report writer is baked into our whole platform that I said does the analysis, does the data integration and the report writing. But that report writer is really designed to be used with our Excel templates and our Word files. So the real big difference with Sync Warrior is you can use it with your stuff. So you can take any document that you have, any Excel document, any Word document, and automate those and link those together. So that's the real difference. Because obviously a lot of you don't use our software or any valuation software using Excel and Word.
Now back to you, Nainesh. How should valuators think about investing the time to automate pieces of the valuation process that they haven't already? Yeah.
I would say first find out where are your pain points. Where does it really hurt? Then you figure out what are the standard operating processes that you can kind of conceptualize those pain points, and then you bring in the automation. In our case, we had a problem with engagement letter. It took a long time to get the engagement letter out. And so when David introduced this Sync Warrior, I said, this is great. If I can bring that time down from multiple hours to few minutes, that's what I want. And then the added advantage of that type of work is now you have a proposal that you want to automate. It becomes much easier. And then the report writing you want to automate, and that becomes much easier. So you identify what are your pain points, start working on that. You have to put effort, time or money, but time mostly. And that, no option on that. Once you put the time, then you have to keep maintaining that automation.
I see. So there's a cost benefit factor here in play, which is normal, which is what you would expect. David, you certainly don't, I'm sure you don't mean to propose that Sync Warrior is good for everybody. So my question is, who's a good fit and who's not a good fit for Sync Warrior?
Yeah, that's a really good, a great question. I think, a lot of evaluators, they're using the same foundational Excel file. In other words, you go to your last one, you actually have a template that you copy and you fill in all the information, you make some modifications, but foundationally, your Excel file is the same one you're using for every case. And the same thing is true for your report. You may have 2 or 3 templates, but you'll go to the last one that was similar. So your language in there is similar, your format is similar. So if you're doing those kind of things, that's a really excellent fit. And the other thing that's a good fit too is if you're bringing Excel data, that's numbers, tables, charts, ranges, those kinds of things into your document, that's also a good fit. We find sometimes people, because it's such a hassle doing that, they put everything in the appendix, and there's pluses and minuses to that. The plus is it's easier to do. The minus is the reports can be harder to read because the data is not in there. So what's not a good fit for somebody is someone that brings very little or no Excel data into the report and they don't want to. And the other one is if they're mostly one-off, like I talk to people that do a lot of M&A work, for example, and their templates tend to be more one-off, their reports are much one-off, the reports may be in PowerPoint and summarized. So that's not a good fit. But if you're doing a very similar kind of report with a similar kind of spreadsheet, this thing can be a godsend.
Got it.
Just wanted to bring up one point, Ed. Maybe it's just me, maybe there are more people, but sometimes my report is completely done and now there is one change. So, if you have to redo all these tables and all these numbers, because everything is connected, right? So if it is linked, the changes become so much easier. And I think that's where so much added value of time saving and hassle. You want to get the report out, but you can't get it out because there is one change which takes a lot of time to fix.
What I was going to ask is, for most of us, including in our firm, the beginning of the process for any client is the engagement letter. And I understand you've automated the engagement letter. Nainesh, could you tell us about that?
Yeah, our practice is quite, we have multiple type of valuation assignment, many different complex projects. And I wanted to capture everything in one engagement letter, which is a bit hard. By the way, for everybody's knowledge, Standards Committee is going to publish a template, engagement letter template in coming days. Anyways, So I wanted to capture that. And so I put a lot of effort with help of David and his team to put all the information in Excel, and you press one click and the engagement letter is ready. All, of course, put in hours beforehand, so that now the complaint that I had earlier that I mentioned, it took almost a day to get the engagement letter out, and now we can get it out in like 20 minutes.
And I think Nainesh, you're willing to share that engagement letter with people, right?
Absolutely, yeah. If anybody, I can share my email address. It's nainesh@completeadvisors.com, and send me email, and I can. Of course, I'll have to walk you through this engagement letter. It's complex, but absolutely.
That's very comforting to know. That's yeah, I'm glad you added that. Now, today, as it is, how are most valuators that you know of are dealing with getting Excel data in their Word reports?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, we see a lot of people using our software, people using their own thing, and there's a number of ways. And the most common way is copy and paste, which is unbelievable. Some people are bringing a lot of data, numbers, tables, and charts, dozens or hundreds of pieces, and they're literally copying it from Excel and then pasting it into Word. So it's a very laborious process. And then, as Nainesh said, if anything ever changes, they have to go through and do that again. And not only is it laborious, but it really is prone to human error. Other people are using Microsoft's Olay, object linking and embedding, but that's a pretty broken technology, and people get really frustrated with it because if you do just a little wrong thing, the whole thing blows up and you don't have it working. Some people use mail merge from Word to Excel. There's some pluses to that. The minuses are there's some limits. You can't do ranges, you can't do charts. And so you're kind of limited to that. Some people print, I've heard companies, I know some companies do this, they print the working papers to PDF, they save their Word files as a PDF and then go to Adobe and kind of marry them together. So there's a whole range of ways to do that, but none of them are really effective and efficient, and they don't really help automate the process, which is exactly why we built a report writer and why we decided to build Sync Warrior for people that aren't using our stuff.
One of the function in the Sync Warrior is you can say in our engagement letter, we have 3 different paragraphs, but you want to just choose one. And it makes it so much easier. You can have a formula true and false, and it automatically picks up the one paragraph that you want out of 3.
Yeah, that's a huge point too. Like one of the things, like DLOM is a great example. Some engagements have a DLOM, some don't. So what do people do? They go find the report where the last time they did a DLOM, they copy that thing, or they have a report that has everything that could possibly be in there, and then they go in and they delete the stuff that doesn't need to be there. Sync Warrior automates that process, so you can decide what things do you want to automate, like DLOM, or you can do a sentence, you can do a word, you can do a paragraph, you can do pages and pages. So it's sort of like an automatic document generation. So it's more than just linking data. It helps automate the report generation process itself.
Okay, we all know client communication is king. Everything rides on how effectively we can communicate with a client. So could you tell me how this software affects client communication? Either one of you.
If whatever you say you are going to send a report today at 5 o'clock, and if you don't send, that's not a good communication. Same with engagement letter. If you're saying engagement letter is coming to you in 24 hours and it doesn't go, it doesn't look right. And I think that's one thing I always feel that Sync Warrior helped me is get things out on time as I expect. I know, Alina, you're waiting for to close this session.
There is you're getting angry looks and angry messages that we were going over.
That's not true.
But before we leave, I want to ask David one
stay longer than our welcome.
David, what was it like being at the South Pole? Tell us quickly about that before we wrap up.
Well, it was an incredible experience. I was 16, and I competed to go. I was a Sea Cadet, and I competed to go on an icebreaker to Antarctica, but I decided I wanted to get to the South Pole because I'd read people like Shackleton. If you haven't read Shackleton's stories, it's incredibly inspiring. So my father and I put together the South Pole Project, and the idea was I was going to go fly a flag at the South Pole and come back and present it to President Carter, sort of as a gesture to youth accomplishment in the Sea Cadets. And so we sold that idea to the Coast Guard and the Navy, and we said it was worth risking my life to go do that. So they flew me to the South Pole, and I flew the flag, and I came back. And trying to get it to President Carter as a sitting president was almost impossible. So I gave up on that idea for actually 38 years. And after my father passed away, I realized the last chapter in that whole story was getting the flag to Carter. So I got the flag. I wrote a letter to President Carter. I put it in a box. I was ready to send it to Atlanta to the Carter Center and thank him for his inspiration and just let him know, here's the flag that I flew for you 38 years ago. I was having lunch with a friend who knew my dad. I was telling him the story, and he smiled and he looked at me and he said, my cousin is President Carter's right-hand man. Would you like his phone number? And miracle upon miracles, 38 years later, I got to present that flag in person to President Carter. So it was an incredible story.
And he's still telling that story. Okay, that's it.
Still telling that story 38 years later.
Thank you, Elena. Sorry that we went over
everything gets synced.
And there's so much more to this, obviously, but we're not going to have enough time. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you,
Ed.
David.
Thanks,
Ed and Nainesh, great having you. So before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that our annual conference will be happening in Las Vegas from December 11th to 13th. So there's still time to register. Don't miss out on this exciting event. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found this, the sessions that we had for you that were valuable. So we want to see you on our next broadcast on December 16th, 2024. Take care and see you.